Welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about your sender infrastructure, aka the technical stuff. Now, full warning, if you're not a technical person, if you have no idea about DNS or FTP or your domain registrar, you should probably stop this video and go and get the person that does to watch it with you. Now, don't watch it instead of you or in lieu of you, but to watch it with you. You need to know what needs to happen. They need to be able to actually do it. See, for me, I have no idea how to do this. That's not the important part. There are so many people who know how to set these things that we're going to talk about up. You just need to know, as the person responsible for email, that they need to be done. You need to ask the questions, have these been set up? If not, why? Who can set them up? When can we get this done by? So, again, sender infrastructure, all the technical stuff. We're going to break this down into three primary areas of focus. Now, all of these are basically sender verifications, right? It's different ways for you to tell the email service providers that the internet service providers that if your internet or your email, gosh, there are so many acronyms. If your email service provider, if you send an email from over here on a third-party system and your domain is hosted over here, it's a way for saying when email comes from here with my name, I know that it's happening. It's not spam. It is coming from me. I'm authenticating it. So it's just ways to say, I know that I'm supposed to tell you that if I'm sending email from someplace other than here, or if I'm sending email from my own server, it's me verifying that I am who I say I am, and the email is coming from who it says it's coming from. So no one is spoofing my email, no one's hacked in to my server and is generating spam because I've said that email's coming from here, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So first we're gonna focus on your SPF, right? Your SPF, Sender Policy Framework. All this is doing is authorizing the IP addresses and the domain addresses that send your email. Right, so if you have a domain here and an IP here, because you're using a third-party email service provider, you need to go into your domain registrar and set up these different records and say, when email from support at Digital Marketer originates from these 9 IP addresses, it's okay, that's us, right? That's us. This email address is over here. You're just verifying that the email that's originating, or it's saying that it's originating from your IP or from your email address, from your domain, even though it's hosted on a different IP, you're verifying that one is the same and that is real email, not spam. Okay, so again, you don't need to understand how to do this. You just need to know to ask the questions. Is it set up? Has it been done? You can go to MX Toolbox and do searches to see. So search MX Toolbox and go to SPF checker, and it'll go in and it'll actually plug in and say, if you put in your URL, if you put in your send from email address, it'll tell you whether or not the SPF records, sender IDs, and DKIM records have been set up. Okay, so SPF is number 1. Number 2 is your sender ID. Again, all this is doing is validating the origin of email messages by verifying the IP address against the owner of the domain. Right? Different ISPs use different methods of verification, so you want to make sure that you have all of them set up. The sender ID is not as frequently used anymore as the other two. Really, DKIM is kind of the more predominant authorization and verification method out there now, but there's no reason not to set them all up, okay? None whatsoever. No reason not to set them up. So you need to set up your sender ID to say, I own this domain. This domain is hosted on this IP. When email originates from these IP addresses, even though it's different than this one, it's actually coming from me. I'm authorizing it. I'm saying that is me as well. Okay? Hopefully this is starting to make sense, but these are the ways that a lot of bulk emailers miss, the little setup nuances that if an internet service provider looks at you from a technical setup and says, what's the probability that this person is a spammer? They go, well, their mailer reputation is good. Their sender infrastructure is set up soundly, so I have no reason to believe, other than potentially content, that they're a spammer. So let's let a little bit of the mail through and see how our users interact with it. Right? If none of that is true, if you have a terrible reputation, if you're always on the blacklist, if your sending volume is inconsistent, and none of this infrastructure is set up, then bad news. You look like a spammer. Spammers don't take time to do that. So if I'm the internet service provider, I'm not giving you the benefit of the doubt either. So much of this is about protecting you and about telling, the powers that be, I know what I'm doing. I have everything set up the way I'm supposed to. I'm playing by the rules. Please let my mails through, and then let's look at results based on how your users are interacting with my messages. Okay, so third and final under sender infrastructure is your DKIM. So your email authentication method, which basically you're digitally signing on a domain basis. So these are 3 different ways to authenticate that this domain and this email or these IPs are fine. If email originates from these IP addresses that's coming from this domain, it's fine, it's me, I know, and I'm set up, I'm playing the game appropriately. Now the fourth, and really less common for you to have to worry about unless you're hosting your own email servers, would be your feedback loops. Now feedback loops are set up to where if someone marks your email spam at AOL, Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail is starting to play with select providers on this, but historically has not had a feedback loop set up. I think now there's a program to where a select few ESPs are approved in there and they have feedback loops, but not all of them. But basically the feedback loop is if someone marks your message as spam in AOL, it triggers an action in AOL to where it fires a post over and lets you know, 1, that they marked spam, and 2, it actually removes them or unsubscribes them from your email list. Now here's why that's important. If that's not happening, right, if that feedback loop is not set up, then if the same person is marking your messages spam, 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 and still getting them, now they're not actually getting them, okay, so it's not getting through. AOL has blocked that. If I send you an email, you mark it as spam, in any of the ISPs, they're going to block you from receiving any more of those mails. But now if I'm still attempting to send them to you, what do I look like? A spammer. I look like a spammer because you've said, this is spam, don't send it to me. There's no feedback loop set up, and I'm still sending emails. Now, while the end user never sees that, the ISP does. And they know that there's a high probability that I'm a spammer. Now, whether that's the case or whether I just don't have my technical setup down, the assumption's going to be I'm a spammer because I'm acting like a spammer. Now, the reason that I said that it doesn't, it's the least important and it doesn't apply to most of you is because if you're using any third-party email service provider, they have the feedback loop set up. So those systems are in place to where anytime anyone marks that spam, it's pulling them out of your account. You don't have to worry about that. But it's not a bad question to ask when you're in the process of evaluating a new email service provider. If nothing else, it makes you sound like you really know what you're doing, and they'll check that box and say, this person's okay, we don't have to worry about them. So that's it for your sender infrastructure and the technical stuff. Really the next factor we're going to get into is the one that is the most important and the one that you have the most control over. So in the next video, we're going to dive into your engagement, your subscriber engagement. So this is exciting. I'll see you in that next video.